Hello, this is Mark Galeotti of the Institute of International Relations Prague with a very quick snap response to today's telephone conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Now, the White House said it was very good. The Kremlin said it was businesslike and constructive. Now, these are the kind of cookie-cutter definitions that you use when you really have nothing important to say. Because let's actually look. Having considered both what the Kremlin and the White House readouts are and some of the first sort of snap punditry, it's clear that this is actually in many ways a very empty phone conversation. They talked about Syria and they agreed that the war had gone on for too long. Well, who's actually saying we want more war? Interestingly, the Americans have agreed to send someone to the next round of the Astana peace talks, which is very much where the Russians are putting their faith. But I think this, as much as anything else, is a desire to ensure that the process does not continue without an American voice, rather than anything more meaningful. I would like to be proven wrong about that one, but at the moment it's very hard to be that optimistic about Syria. They both agreed to work together to try and deal with the problem of North Korea. Well, that's fine, that's great, and obviously everyone agrees that in fact North Korea is a massive geopolitical problem. But unless and until someone actually has an answer as to what to do about it, beyond just simply hoping that the Chinese will fix it all, again, it's one of those essentially rather meaningless political phrases. The interesting thing beyond that is that there was an agreement to try and arrange, and I'd stress that, not even definitely, but to try and arrange for the two men to meet in the fringes of the G20 summit in July to take place in Hamburg. Now, it's quite interesting that, first of all, it's going to be bundled in with a general international trip at a time when we have all kinds of second or frankly even third echelon global statespeople heading to Washington. There's clearly no sense of Putin thinking of go there. Putin does not want to be doing it on Trump's turf. And likewise, at the moment, there's no even hint of an invitation from the Russians to Trump to come to the Kremlin. I think what this says is two things. One is still that both sides are actually very, very uncertain as to what the outcome of any meeting would be. Who knows what Donald Trump thinks? That is something I'm not even going to try and sort of plumb. But I think it's fairly clear that there are people around him who are concerned about how Trump would actually handle himself in face-to-face talks with Putin. Putin, who, let's be honest, is known to be a pretty formidable figure, always thoroughly briefed and so forth when he actually has meetings. And likewise, I think, from the Russian side, there is a concern, having already encountered the degree to which Trump is a very unpredictable statesman. I mean, the very fact that they sort of went from nothing to 59 cruise missiles on a Syrian airport, very much catching the Russians by surprise. There is, I think, a concern that if the personal chemistry does not work well, and I think there's pretty good grounds for expecting that it won't, then who knows actually how it might affect the wider policy. I mean, this is the faintly surreal thing about today's geopolitics. It's that far, far more than usual, personal relationships now swirling around the White House matter. So I think for that reason, everyone's being very, very cautious. But the second thing that this failure to even move towards a serious one-to-one summit shows is, quite frankly, the extent to which, in this age of the art of the deal American president, there is very, very little that there can be any kind of meaningful deal built on between Washington and Moscow. What ultimately does Russia have to offer? Cooperation in Syria, frankly, America doesn't really need Russian cooperation. America isn't really looking to get too involved in Syria. It's busy enough in Iraq and to a lesser extent Afghanistan. Be a little bit less mischievous in North Africa. Be a little bit less intrusive in Europe. Well, Trump doesn't care about the former. And quite frankly, Trump is not exactly a fan of the European Union, so he's not even that bothered by the latter. Actually, Putin has very, very few cards to play. And up to now, he's played his limited hand very, very well. But the point is, I think this is a White House that doesn't really care that much about Moscow when it comes down to it. All the talk about Trump as being some kind of Siberian candidate, I hope, has been put to rest. Yes, there are concerns about the business connections of people in Trump's White House and around and connected to Trump's White House. But to be honest, I think that's not a specifically Russian thing. I'm just as concerned as what that could mean that Chinese money or Saudi money or Nigerian money or anyone else's money, what kind of political leverage it could possibly buy. But for here and now, I mean, it is clear that Trump's vision of the world, insofar as he has one, is one which is very, very pragmatic. It's very much based on who can do something for me and for America. And when it comes down to it, there's not a lot that Putin can offer. It would be embarrassing, to say the least, for them to meet and not be able to actually make some kind of grand claim that they've been able to achieve something. And this is, I think, what this very lukewarm, very good, very businesslike or whatever, but in practical terms, lukewarm phone conversation demonstrates. It's that at the moment, there is America, there are Russian interests, and there is very, very little room for the two to combine. Doesn't mean to say that they're in a collision course or anything like that, not at all. Russia faces the same kind of attitude that so many other countries, which once upon a time were so important for Washington, is, which is essentially one of malign neglect. And that, I think, is where we find ourselves. But that's just my very first initial judgment.